One wrong move in my kayak while out bass fishing one time, and I was trapped underwater. I was drowning. I was dying. But my guardian angel had other plans. This is how God saved me on that river that day. I'm going to share this story of my near-death experience, and you're not going to believe everything that came together to save my life that day on that river. Stick with me to the end, too. I'm going to tell you something pretty funny about what I found out about the river I was on that almost took my life. I've enjoyed fishing my whole life. Since I was 5 years old, I'd go out on my own fishing in the canals around South Florida. And I loved it, and I still love it. Never stopped fishing my whole life. When we moved up to the mountains of Tennessee, all that was available was freshwater fishing in these lakes and in these rivers. And I loved it. It was great. There's this river that is only about 10 minutes away from where we lived. And I used to fish on it a lot, all the time. And one day, it was a nice, calm day. It was a beautiful day, and it should have been just a nice, relaxing fishing trip. And it turned into sheer terror in a matter of seconds. And I'm going to explain what happened. So it's called the Nolichucky River. It's in East Tennessee. I think it spans a couple different states. The part of the river that I would access to go fishing is actually part of a state park. It's Davy Crockett State Birthplace State Park or something like that. And I'd put in that river, and I would actually go up some rapids, not really bad rapids, but I was able to get around them. I'd walk my kayak around the rapids, get in it, paddle up a little bit more, or pedal up more, and I would go up about 3 or 4 rapids, and I would just float down the river, and I would go down these rapids. They're pretty mild and a little bit of fun to go down the rapids, and then once I would get over the rapids, there'd be a nice calm section where I would just keep floating, and I would fish, and it was great. So on this day, I had a great day of fishing. I caught so many fish, and I'm a catch and release kind of guy. I didn't keep any of the fish, but I'm approaching the last set of rapids, which are probably the most active out of all the rapids that I would go into. And as I approach the rapids, and I'd been down these rapids several times. I mean, probably 3 dozen times or so. And as I approached these rapids, something was different about it that day. The river seemed a little bit more swollen than usual, and the rapids were a little bit faster than usual. Come to find out, there was a lot of rain way upriver, and I think in another state, which I didn't realize, and it was really washing down quickly from the mountains. So I'm approaching these rapids, and I'm looking at it, and it was too late. I'm in it. I mean, the current's taking me. There's no getting out of it. And it started steering me towards some overhanging trees. And I had my fishing poles. I had 3 fishing poles in the back standing up behind me. And I was afraid that they were going to catch the trees, and I was going to lose $600 worth of fishing poles. So as I was entering the rapids, I kind of leaned back a bit to grab the fishing poles to lay them down on the deck. And at that very moment, I hit a submerged tree that was never there before. It must have been washed down prior to me getting there. And so I hit that tree that was barely submerged, and it threw me out of the kayak, right off the back end or the side of the kayak. And before I knew it happened so fast. That's what was so scary about it. Before I even realized it, I was underwater and being swept into this rock face. And somehow I ended up with my back up against the rock face. And this water was rushing over my face. I was drowning. I was drowning in a matter of seconds. I couldn't believe that I was in this situation. The force of this water was beyond anything that I imagined. I couldn't believe the power of this water. Now, mind you, I'm from South Florida. We don't have rivers like that there. I've never experienced that. I'm a coastie. I was in the Coast Guard for years. I was the designated rescue swimmer on boat crews. So I'm a very good swimmer, and I used to swim all the time in the ocean in very rough seas, but it was nothing like this. I can't describe the sense of awe and the sense of terror that overcame me. So I'm up against this rock wall, and my arms are up like this. I could barely move my arms. And I did have a personal flotation device on. I had a life vest on, but the water rushing so hard just was washing water right over my face. I was swallowing gallons of water. It was going up my nose, basically being waterboarded. And I knew At that moment, I actually said to myself, this is how you're going to die. You're going to die. And I would like to say that at some point I called out to God, but I didn't. And things just happened so fast. But here's where my guardian angel stepped in. And this is so weird. I cannot explain it. So I'm dying. I know I'm dying. And I went off the side of the kayak. My kayak should have been way ahead of me, down the rapids and gone. Somehow, some way, my kayak ended up behind me, and at the last second, I see it floating by me, and it's floating sideways. It's not straight, it's sideways, and it was just within reach. And in the back of my kayak, and I'll post some photos of it, in the back of my kayak is a big carrying handle. Somehow that carrying handle was perfectly within my reach, and I was able to reach out and grab it at the last second. And because the kayak was sideways in that current, it was able to pull me free of that rock face. And I got around that rock face, and the current took me around that rock face to another bunch of rocks that weren't in that rapid area, and it was actually calm. And I was able to kind of just paddle my feet over to these rocks and stand up on some rocks. And I remember just catching my breath going, did that really just happen? And am I actually free, or am I dead? And I don't know that I can adequately describe to you the power of this water and how I was drowning. I should be dead. Where that kayak came from, it was like God Almighty through my guardian angel had put that kayak exactly where it needed to be at exactly the right time. And again, it shouldn't have been back behind me and coming up after I was thrown. It should have been way ahead of me. So I get out of the water, and I'm standing there, and I'm just holding on to the side of the kayak, and I'm catching my breath, and I happen to glance across the river, and there were three people, two guys and a girl, right across the river at that point, the river was only about 20 feet wide, maybe. And they were just sitting there with their mouths wide open, not saying, they're just like, they were staring so long at me. Finally, one guy's like, are you okay? And I said, yeah. He goes, we were going to call 911, but it just happened so fast. Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. And I happened to look down at my kayak. I had lost my pedal drive for this. It's a Hobie Outback. It's a fishing kayak. So I told the guy, I said, yeah, I'm good. And what's funny is pretty much everything had gone overboard in my kayak. So, but there is a paddle that attaches to the side of the kayak in case something happens to your pedal drive. And so you can at least paddle in somewhere. So I caught my breath, and I still had a little bit of the rapids to go down, but it wasn't anything bad at all. So I got back in my kayak, and I'm shaking. I'm shaking like a leaf. And I just paddled to the boat ramp, which was only a couple hundred feet beyond that. But the thing is, I've never been that terrified in my life. Now, I'll remind you, I was a cop for 30 years. I had been involved in many, many deadly force encounters, shootings, fights to the death, car pursuits where crashes. But the thing is, I was never scared in those instances. It's weird to say that. And I guess the only way to explain it is when you're a cop and you're in mortal combat, you at least have some control over what's happening. You have your training to fall back on. You have weapons. You have, hopefully, backup on its way. But with the river, I had no control. None. It was all river. It was all nature. And I was losing. And there was nothing I could do. I was powerless against this river. You see the difference in that? And even though I do have some PTSD from the job, nothing I can't handle, nothing I haven't been able to handle over the years, this river incident, this near-death experience in the river, gave me major PTSD. I'm over it, but for, I would say, 2 years after that, I would wake up in a cold sweat, just panting, I don't know how to describe it. The panic that would overcome me just out of nowhere, thinking about what happened in that river. And, I somehow was able to get to the boat ramp and get my kayak back in the pickup truck. And I drove home, and like I said, it's only about 10 minutes away from my house. And I called my wife on the way home, and I said, hey, can you meet me outside when I get home? And I guess the way that my voice was, my wife knew something was wrong. She said later on that she thought I had found out that my mom had died, because she was very elderly at the time. But I remember pulling into the driveway, and I was still white as a ghost, still shaking, because it was only a 10-minute drive. And my wife, you should have seen what, and I told her what happened, and she just hugged me. And I didn't want the kids to hear me tell the story. That's why I wanted her to meet me outside. But I don't know. Some of you watching this, okay, he got a little wet, he fell in it. Again, I don't know that I can adequately express the power, the sheer power of this river that plastered me up against that rock face, and how helpless I was and how powerless I was. And if it wasn't for that kayak being put exactly where it was, I'd be dead. There's no question in my mind. The water was rushing into my face, and I could not breathe. And I'm choking and coughing, and the water's going down my throat, up my nose. I can't explain the movement of that kayak other than to say it was Almighty God himself. He used my guardian angel to save my life, and there's no other explanation. I can't come up with one. Now, the aftermath, kind of funny. I lost $600 worth of fishing poles. I lost my pedal drive. Pedal drive is proprietary to the Hobie product. So you have to go through Hobie again to buy the new pedal drive. $1,000. Those pedal drives are $1,000. So I had to eat it. I had to go and get a new pedal drive because I was stupid and I didn't have the pedal drive attached to a lanyard. And I pulled it out because I was afraid I was going to hurt it with any rocks or anything like that. So what's kind of funny, if you could say there's something funny out of this story, is the name of the river is the Nolichucky River. And later on, when I'd run into locals that had been there for generations and things like that, and I mentioned it to one guy about what happened, and he said to me, "You know what the name Nolichucky means in Native American, right?" And I said, "I had no idea." And he says, "It means river of death." I said, "That fits. That fits." But like I said, when I first started kayaking on that river, the rapids were not that bad. I mean, it was fun. I would just go down. It was a nice, fast little run. What happened? I guess because, again, the river was swollen and it was moving. And I guess that's what did it. And then that tree that was submerged that I didn't even see, that was never there before because I'd been down those rapids plenty of times. But anyway, this situation, even though I lost a bunch of money from this and everything, I came out with my life intact, and it deepened my faith again even more, and it really made me appreciate my guardian angel again. He stepped in so many times to save me on the job where I should be dead from deadly force encounters on the job and accidents, things like that. I should have been dead. And it brings to mind again how I was never worried or never scared during these deadly force encounters on the job. Not in the moment, because in the moment you fall back on your training and it's kind of like autopilot at that point. It's afterward when you sit there and the adrenaline dump comes and you just go, whoa, that could have been a lot worse than it was. That's when you get scared, actually, not while you're in it. At least I don't remember ever being scared in a deadly force encounter, but this one scared me. And I thank God for sparing me that day, for letting me come home to my family. But it took probably 2 years after that before I was able to get back in that water, or even the calm lake that I used to, different than the river. It took me 2 years to get back in that kayak. And now we're back down in South Florida, and I fish these inland waters all over the place for snook and redfish. You got to contend with sharks and things like that, and pretty strong currents still, but nothing like the Nolichucky River and the power of that river. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the story. It was absolutely a near-death experience. There's nothing hyperbolic about that. I almost did die, and I was saved. I was saved by Almighty God himself, and I thank him, and I thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comments, have you ever had a near-death experience? And if so, what saved you? I'd really like to hear about that. I'm not just saying that. I'd really like to hear your story. You know, God has blessed me in my life so abundantly, and I'm just so grateful to him, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share this kind of thing with you guys and to share my faith, my Catholic faith. Thank God for the Catholic faith, right? You know, with all the troubles in the church and this Catholic against that Catholic, none of that matters as long as we're attached to one holy Catholic and apostolic church, the one true church established by Christ himself. Nothing else matters but our faith. Till next time, God bless, and Padre Pio, Order Pro Nobis.